Hello there. Welcome again to uh, Intro Lectures. Today we're going to be talking about German Romanticism and a little tiny spurt of kind of proto-romantic writing in what is today Germany, known as Sturm und Drang. Now, first, uh, let's call back to when we're talking about neoclassicism, right? Because this particular movement is very much a reaction against the prescriptive neoclassical ideas. So if we remember, right, uh, neoclassicism was all about kind of making what they thought Aristotle wanted, but like more so, right? And so the unity of time, right? Things having to happen within like a 24-hour period, unity of place, things had to happen in the same place, and unity of action, it had to be like one plot, no subplots, right? But additionally, in terms of the plot and characters, they had to have decorum, right? People should act on stage the way we would expect them and they should act in real life. The verisimilitude, things should happen realistically, right? It must teach a moral lesson, right? Good people must be rewarded and bad people must be punished, which then implies no large casts, multiple locations, violence, impropriety, ghosts, deuses ex machina, subplots, unpunished evil, soliloquies, tragicomedy, right? No mixing of genres, that kind of thing. Um, and it he said yes to things largely about, if we remember the Moliere play Tartuffe, right? It took place kind of in a settled place, right? It was indoors. The characters engaged in, reason or kind of buffoonery, unreason, but they thought that they were acting reasonably. Reason was good, right? Um, there are different stock characters and a kind of objectivity, right? There is an objective way to view this, right? It is not, there are not multiple truths for multiple different people. So talking about Germany at this time, we need to remember that Germany was not a unified country, right? Whereas, France was certainly. Voltaire, this French kind of philosopher, statesman fellow, in 1756 said, "This body which called itself and which still calls itself the Holy Roman Empire was in no way holy nor Roman nor an empire." Right? The territories that kind of coalesced into Germany were called the Holy Roman Empire for a while. But this particular map that was around 1792 of kind of the German peoples, right? Every single one of these little colored dots or these colored uh, uh, lands, I guess, were a different political entity, right? The large ones, you can see that large kind of blue sea in the northeast, right? That is, Prussia, right? Down in the south, that big yellow is Bohemia, right? The golden one in the middle is Saxony. Down the green one in the kind of lower, the southern central is Bavaria. But if once you get a little bit further west, it starts getting ridiculous, right? You can see, Württemberg down here near essentially Switzerland, right? It's broken up into huge things. Munster is here, kind of near the Netherlands, and is Lingen and Minden and Ravensburg in the middle. Munster, Hanover, Holstein, Schleswig, right? All these different things. They were all German people, but they were not one kind of unified political entity. Um, so that's when we talk. So just keep that in mind when I'm talking about Germany in that time. I am talking about a people whose identity was more cultural rather than political, right? They all kind of thought of themselves, they spoke German and they all thought of themselves as German in a sense, but not, but there was more kind of a nation and a people rather than a state per se. So there was this movement called Sturm und Drang, right? It was called Storm and Stress. It was a proto-romantic artistic movement in Germany. Now, when I say romantic here, I'm not talking about the kind of genre of movie, right? Where like, there's a lot of people falling in love and stuff necessarily, that kind of romantic. I'm talking about the kind of artistic movement of Romanticism, right? Which, sure, absolutely has people falling in love, but it's a little bit kind of broader in terms of themes and settings and what it values, right? And Romanticism is very much it sets itself up in opposition to classicism. So whereas I was just talking about neoclassicism or classicism, right, emphasized kind of reason and objectivity as good things, the Sturm and Drang movement and later Romanticism says no, right? Objectivity is not what we should strive for. Subjectivity, right? The personal experience is what we should strive for. People are not really driven to act by their reason, right? They don't, people don't act because they're constantly making pros and cons lists in their head and choosing the one that is, has the most utility. No, people act based upon their emotional urges and drives. Now, Sturm und Drang came from a play by a fellow named Friedrich Klinger, who wrote this in 1776. Um, he originally titled the play Wirrwarr, which means kind of like hubbub or commotion, but someone suggested that he change the name of the play to Sturm und Drang, or Storm and Stress, or Storm and Urge, or something like that. Now, in this particular play, this is the first time actually in this that we are going to mention the United States or America as kind of a political unit. So this play, again, written in Germany, in German, was about a feud in an American inn against the backdrop of the American Revolutionary War. Although the war's actual politics are not important, right? You have different characters who were in Germany, and like one kidnaps his friends and takes them over to America in this kind of romantic, like I'm going to fight in a war kind of thing, and I'm, not even going to necessarily join a side, but I'm going to like get a bunch of people together and fight. But the actual politics of it, why the Americans were fighting, is not really a part of it. It's more about the importance of the war, of the Revolutionary War in this play, is to kind of have a stormy background, right? None of the play actually involves fighting or, the British even, right? Or even really Americans as Americans. So it's about two feuding families who happen upon each other in an inn, right? Um, and these two families, like they fall in love with different people, they duel, they conspire against each other, they make big huge proclamations and declarations, and they are acting upon things like, the urge for revenge, or even like the urge for love, even more so than kind of reasonably thinking like, well, this is due to my honor, right? It's more about like, I'm angry because this thing happened. And contrasting to what neoclassicism thought, that what should happen are things that are realistic and could normally happen, right? There are a ton of unrealistic coincidences, right, that are just thrown into this particular play that really stir the emotional pot, right? So the whole feud between these families is because they thought that someone was lost at sea, right? They thought that this one family thought that their patriarch was like left to die by this other family. And at the very end, the kind of the Deus Ex Machina like is like, no, wait, this guy who we left on a boat alone to die at sea actually didn't. Yay! Like this other random person took him and saved him and this kind of thing. And that, becomes a big, huge plot point. It's like, yeah, okay, so this person who was left alone in a boat to die at sea. No, really, he's saved. Um, and another coincidence, this random sea captain who happens upon the inn, wait a minute, he's actually a very key player in the rivalries between these two feuding families back in Germany, right? He's the long lost son of one of the characters, right? And these two feuding German families just happen to find each other in this inn, right? And so you can kind of conceive of this play as like constantly having a storm in the background, right? There's like always thunder and lightning because the characters are acting upon emotion. And yeah, not kind of rational. And I don't mean to say that characters in neoclassical plays did not act rationally. And that's not what I'm saying. What I am saying is that the value of rationality itself is not equated with good automatically. And the qualities of acting upon emotion are not valued as bad automatically, right? And so the characters in neoclassical plays sure did act upon emotion, but it was pretty much uniformly thought as a bad thing to do. And characters who acted upon rationality were the good characters who were acting the way they were supposed to in a good way, right? And so the main lovers in this, they either dramatically marry, or one of them, like, because he doesn't want this love, he runs off and becomes a hermit, right? He doesn't just say like, "Nah, I don't want to get married." He's like, "No, I don't want this at all." Like, and he runs away, becomes a hermit. Now, in talking about kind of it's this particular movement's relationship to kind of society at large, right? It was more so than kind of the neoclassicists, um, very much kind of setting itself in opposition to the status quo, right? It says like things in society are not the way they should be, and they should change, kind of broadly, right? Where we hadn't seen that in a lot of the plays that we've um, been studying recently in terms of the Enlightenment. A lot of those plays are very much kind of pro status quo in terms of the whole kind of political and cultural organization. Now, to an example of this. Um, there's a character, the main character in Friedrich Schiller's play, The Robbers, right? In Act 5, the very last act, he has this big, huge speech when he's talking to someone who's talking to him about God. Now, this character, he's the main character, but he's not necessarily thought of as a good guy, but he's sympathetic. He has been spurned by his parents, right? He has this older brother who everyone loves, and he doesn't. He has this plan to get rid of him, get rid of his father, and like take everything, right? And he ends up like killing a bunch of people in the play. But at the end, um, he's talking to this almost a priest, and said, when the priest says like, "Heaven have mercy upon you," this is this is the way he responds. "Thou liest. Vulgar prejudice, mere superstition. It has not yet been proved that the past is not past and forgotten, or that there is an eye upon this earth to take account of what passes on it. Humph, humph. But whence then this fearful whisper to my soul? Is there really an avenging judge above the stars? No, no. Yes, yes, a fearful monitor within bears witness that there is one above the stars who judgeth. What? I meet the avenger above the stars this very night? No, no, I say. All is empty, lonely, desolate, beyond the stars, miserable subterfuge beneath which thy cowardice seeks to hide itself. And if there should be something in it after all, no, no, it cannot be. I insist that it cannot be, but yet if there should be, woe to thee if thy sins should all have been registered above, if they should be counted over to thee this very night. Why creeps this shudder through my frame to die? Why does that word frighten me thus to give an account to the avenger there above the stars? And if he should be just, the wails of orphans and widows of the oppressed, the tormented ascending to his ears, and he be just, why have they been afflicted? And why have I been permitted to trample upon them? So you can see in this speech, this guy is waffling between huge extremes, right? In terms of his like belief in God, even, right? No, no, and immediately yes, yes, right? You can just feel his internal kind of turmoil shaking back and forth. And, frankly, at the very end, he gives a pretty good synopsis of what is in a theology called the problem of evil, right? If God is all powerful and all just, why is there suffering? And all knowing, rather. And then he talks about, a little bit later, he talks about the soul. He says, I am well aware that those who have come off short in this world look forward to eternity, but they will be sadly disappointed. I've always read that our whole body is nothing more than a blood spring, and that with its last drop, mind and thought dissolve into nothing. They share all the infirmities of the body. Why then should they not cease with its dissolution? Why not evaporate in its decomposition? Let a drop of water stray onto your brain, and life makes a sudden pause which borders on non existence. And this pause, continued, is death. Sensation is the vibration of a few chords which, when the instrument is broken, cease to sound. If I raise my seven castles, if I dash this Venus to pieces, there is an end of their symmetry and beauty. Behold, thus it is with your immortal soul. This is this is a rebuttal, right, and a rejoinder to the talk about an eternal soul going to heaven. So you can tell, right? Whereas the previous plays that we've talked about very much take it as an assumption, right? That, God is on his throne and all is right with the world kind of thing. And that things that are in power and beliefs that society broadly have, they are supposed to, right? This is absolutely not decorous, right? This is not in decorum, what this character is doing. So then we get to this fella, Johann Wolfgang von Goethe, from 1749 to 1832. He is a novelist, a dramatist, a scientist, a poet, a statesman. He's kind of a little bit like Seneca when we talked about him earlier. Very much kind of a statesman, a man of letters, kind of everything. And Aristotle too, honestly. Now, the reason I'm talking about him is he wrote a novel. This is not a play, but this is a novel in 1774 called The Sorrows of Young Werther. Now, this is an epistolary novel, which means it is a novel that is structured as a whole bunch of letters. Right? And at the end, this young man, Werther, kills himself. He shoots himself in the head after being tormented by his obsessive, unrequited infatuation with another person. Now, the reason I bring this up is because that is all the book, right? All of the book at the very end, he shoots himself, and that's it, right? And he's not necessarily punished per se. It's just he goes out with a bang. Um, Now, this is considered to kind of be a literary spark of the Sturm and Drang movement because it has like a young character who is thrown back and forth by his passions. He does not act rationally, even though he kind of says that he is. We all know he's not, um, and kills himself. Now, this particular play was banned in many countries and cities because uh, there were a string of suicides in various countries that had people dressing up in outfits that kind of echoed the outfits that this young Werther wore. And the powers that be were thinking, oh no, this work is causing young people to kill themselves, so we're going to ban it. And so Goethe also wrote this play called Faust. Now, you might recognize that name. Faust or Faustus, Dr. Faustus, is a mythical, might not be the right word. It's kind of like a folk tale, but not kind of, Alice in Wonderland kind of folk tale. I would say more of like a legend or myth in Germany about there's this character, right, of Dr. Faustus, who is a learned man in this play, Faust, who ends up being bored with just having learning, right? And he thinks there has to be something more to this life than just knowing stuff. And so he sells his soul to the devil, right, for a whole bunch of power. And the play is an interaction between Faust and the incarnation of the devil, right, Mephistopheles, right? And then in this particular play, it does not observe the unities at all, right? Not only does it have like a devil appearing from a puff of smoke, right? And it has, which is unrealistic, right? It has a character acting in a very non-decorous way, right? Selling his soul to the devil, right? It jumps in times, right? It fast travels essentially from one place to another, to another, to another, to another. And it has big, huge casts of these fantastical creatures of angels and demons and satyrs and all these sorts of things dancing around. So it's a crazy play, but it is it was thought to be, um, even today, thought to be the best play that has been written in German, right? So it's a very important play, Faust. Now, I want to show you this particular sculpture, right, as a way of kind of getting in to, um, well, here, I'm going to go back to Romanticism for just a second. So again, so Romanticism as a broad uh, theatrical or artistic movement emphasized emotion and passion instead of reason, right? It emphasized and valued instinct instead of deliberation. Nature, going out and living among nature was a good thing, not a bad thing, right? It favored kind of nature in the wild. You can learn from um, you can learn from nature. You can learn from a little squirrel and a dung beetle and the birds up in the sky, as opposed to learning from kind of learned philosophers and teachers and your intellectual betters, right? Now, Romanticism thought that the neoclassical rules had the sole purpose of strangling true artistry. Like, why are you telling us these are lists of things that we cannot do? Why? All of these things, says the Romantic, all of these things that the neoclassicists say that we can't do, they are part of the human experience, right? And if they are part of the human experience, then they should be shown on stage, and there is value to them, right? Um, and you might notice when I'm talking about these protagonists, they were often selfish, right? They were not noble. They were not doing things for the betterment of society. They were doing things for kind of private, selfish reasons. And not selfish as a bad thing necessarily, right? But selfish as in kind of self-interested. They're doing these things for themselves, not for any kind of broader reasons. And they were driven by subconscious, not necessarily conscious things. They deal with folk tales, subjectivity, freedom, right? As opposed to kind of realism, objectivity, and things like duty and station. So this is a particular statue. It's actually in, I think, Hyderabad, India. But it's a statue that someone carved out of wood. And you might look at this and say, like, that's two statues, right? But notice that it's a mirror. It is actually one statue. And the front, right? This is the character of Mephistopheles. And in the back, you can see in the mirror the character of Caroline that Faust is in love with in that play. And Mephistopheles says in Faust, there is a natural method for recapturing youth. The remedy requires no money, physician, nor magic. Just go out in the fields and begin to dig and plow. Keep your whole life within a little circle. Eat simple food. Live with the beasts as a beast. Don't be too proud to dung the field you reap. That's the best method, believe me, to keep yourself young at 80. Now, in this play, Mephistopheles is uh, written to be telling the truth uh, in this particular instance. He is, broadly evil, right? But he's not a liar in terms of this kind of thing. He is saying, or at least he's not structured to be a liar. We are not meant to hear this and be like, no, 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 that's just the devil saying this. This is, BS. No. And I like this particular statue because it does have a very kind of romantic flair to it. And it's like this, this virginal, pure beauty, this kind of object literally on a pedestal, right, of awe and valuing. On the very other side is this kind of bragging, confident, demonic character as well. It's, oh, there's two sides to humanity, right, kind of thing. One item, one thing can swing very wildly between two extremes of human experience. So yay for German Romanticism. I am going to put up obviously the discussions. I finished grading all of your midterms, so that all should be up. Cool. I will see you all next time.